Jody Wilson-Raybould confirmed the RCMP contacted her in the spring. In light of both the Ethics Commissioner's finding and the revelations about the RCMP's previous involvement, I have formally requested the RCMP take another look.
Conservatives will continue to ask questions, as is important for an official opposition. We will continue to stand up and defend jobs.
Conservative leader, as you heard there, Andrew Scheer, wants the Mounties to take a look at the SNC-Lavalin controversy. That's following confirmation in last week's report from the Ethics Commissioner that the Prime Minister did try to, quote, bend the will of former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould. Scheer sent a letter to the RCMP Commissioner suggesting obstruction of justice charges may apply, but Wilson-Raybould has said that she doesn't believe anything illegal took place. So, is it appropriate for the opposition to try and call in the RCMP? And what does it all mean politically? Time to bring in the power panel. In Toronto, Brad Levine is a principal at Council Public Affairs. In Montreal, Yolande James is a former Quebec Liberal cabinet minister. In here with me in Ottawa, Rachel Curran is a former director of policy to Stephen Harper, now with Harper and Associates. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Rachel, we'll start with you because my guess is that this is a lot about politics, and that's, of course, where I want to get you guys to weigh in. I understand the impetus for asking for the RCMP, but it doesn't matter. I mean, the RCMP will decide independently whether or not to conduct an investigation. What is the strategy behind, I guess, saying we're formally calling for one?
Yeah, I mean, the strategy is pretty straightforward, I think. It's to keep highlighting
exactly.
to keep highlighting the issue. And you're right, unlike an ethics investigation, which can be initiated by a letter from an MP, an RCMP investigation is only initiated by the RCMP. So it doesn't matter what anyone writes to them or what anyone requests. They will make their own decision. But I think, at least on the face of it, given what the Ethics Commissioner came out with in his report, there is a case to be made for obstruction of justice. And I think that is at least arguable. And so Andrew Scheer, understandably, would very much like to make that case and to have the RCMP assist in making that case.
Do you mean specifically in reference, and let me just get you to clarify, because this is my big question. Again, I've said this many times, I'm not a lawyer, but it seemed to be that, that following the release of the report, the Conservatives were saying that because of the part of the report in which the Ethics Commissioner says 9 people wanted to give us information they said was relevant, they needed cabinet confidence waived, and it wasn't. Is that what constitutes obstruction of justice, or potentially?
Well, also interfering with the exercise of the Attorney General's discretion and with
just trying to bend her will?
And with prosecutorial discretion, so that undermining of prosecutorial independence, that undermining of the rule of law, which are fundamental constitutional principles on which our system of government is based.
But he never did. He says he never did. The Prime Minister says he never did direct her to do anything.
But look, the Ethics Commissioner has now said this wasn't about jobs. This was about improperly influencing the Attorney General, and he did find that. To further the Prime Minister's partisan political interests and to further the corporate interest of SNC-Lavalin.
Well, he saw those jobs as the specter of the job loss as linked to the private interests of SNC.
Well, and linked to the Prime Minister's partisan political interests too. So it wasn't the jobs, it was the fact that, there was an election coming up in Quebec and this was going to impact that election. It was going to impact Liberal fortunes. And so that was the primary consideration. So those findings, and they're very clear. I mean, the report actually lays this out really comprehensively and really clearly. Those findings amount, at least on the face of it, I think, to obstruction of justice. So Andrew Scheer, I think, is perfectly within his rights to say, this looks like obstruction of justice to me. I hope the RCMP are going to investigate. But look, the strategy behind writing the letter is clearly to keep this issue at the top of the public's minds.
Yolande, do you think that the strategy works? Do you think that calling on the RCMP keeps people thinking about SNC?
No, at this time I won't. I mean, if there were to be an investigation, and just to be clear, as you've said, that's a determination that no one here can make. That will be a determination that will be made by the RCMP, and we'll see. If that were to happen, would that be good news for the government? Of course not. That would not be good news. But when you look to Andrew Scheer's motives from the very beginning, of course it serves him politically to keep this story in the news. But at the same time, I kind of feel like he squeezed that lemon pretty tight. There's no juice left in that lemon at this point. There's no new information.
Even with the ethics commissioner's report?
Even I'll go as far as to saying, and I don't want to minimize the language or the findings of the ethics commissioner's report, but I feel as though the people who reproach the Prime Minister's actions and his office actions that's already been accounted for, is what I want to say.
Right.
And those that feel that it is within the national interest to have these types of agreements, as other countries in the world have done, will still feel the same way. I don't think that changed anything. Now, were this to go to the RCMP and have an investigation, as I've said, I don't think that would be good news, but we can't make that determination, and that hasn't happened. Andrew Scheer can't write the end of the story the way that he wants to. We have to deal with the facts as they stand, and there has not been any confirmation of there being an investigation at this time.
Brad, what about the part of all of this is just Jody Wilson-Raybould's own determination that nothing illegal happened? I had her on the show not long ago, and she was very, she's very careful with her words, but she said that based on all the relevant information that she's seen, that she still believes that nothing rises to the bar of illegality. A statement that she made when asked during her testimony, she says it's like the pressure applied to her was highly inappropriate, but she doesn't see that it's raised to that bar.
Right, and as an independent member of Parliament, she's open to that opinion. Obviously, she's learned it in this file, no question, but it's not up to her. And it wasn't.
When she clarified, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't put words in. She said the RCMP will ultimately make that determination.
Sure, and that is possible. But on the politics of it, opposition parties have this tool in the toolbox. To drag it out as and I guess going third in this round, I get to be the tiebreaker. It doesn't cost an opposition party anything more than typing it on letterhead and shipping that out electronically to the RCMP. It doesn't cost them anything. The challenge is when you do it too often, do you become where it becomes a bit petty? I don't think this is the case here. I take you back, Vashi, to December of 2005, where our justice critic in the New Democratic Party of Canada sent a letter to the RCMP asking for an investigation into the activities of Ralph Goodale at the time, and that letter kind of went under the radar until it became front page news.
That happened right during the election, right?
When we're butting up against this election, you don't know when the RCMP are going to announce, but it is a tool in the toolbox for opposition parties to put it out there. But it's one more media cycle to review what's been done. Now, this issue, Yolande makes the case, and as other Liberal commentators on this channel have made over the last while, that this is all baked in. I don't agree with that. I respectfully disagree that it is baked in. They're hoping that it's baked in, but there is a lot of damning language in that Ethics Commissioner report. And it's not an issue about the engineering firm or about those jobs, which again, those jobs don't disappear. We're still building airports. We're still building bridges in this country, regardless of whether or not SNC is permitted to bid on them for the next decade or not, or if they were given a DPP, other engineers would come to work for SNC. So it's not about the jobs per se. It's about whether or not you can trust Justin Trudeau, who said, and just to go back to one of the elements of trust in that report, he said that he completely worked hand in glove with the Ethics Commissioner on all the evidence that we're soliciting. What we saw in that report is that was not the case. And in fact, the Ethics Commissioner was very clear that Trudeau and his staff stood in obstruction of his work. It's about trust, and the election will be about trust, and people will...
Who are you saying that it will sway, though? If the positions are, like, is there a pool of people that will join the undecided camp, or if positions are not baked in? Then we
haven't even started the campaign in earnest, although lots of evidence suggests. But many Canadians would. If there is an RCMP investigation, that's going to sway some people. If there's new evidence coming to light, that will switch people. But no, this is not. We're not voting today. We're voting in October, and there's tons of evidence, and discourse going to take place between now and then. And if Trudeau comes out and says, "Oh, I promised this," then the opposition are going to throw, well, you promised electoral reform. This would be the last election ever under the old system. You didn't do it. You said you'd be different, but let's take a look at SNC.
Okay,
There's lots of time for this.
I got to take a commercial break, but as you said, there's lots of time for this, and we will, I'm sure, be discussing this subject again with the Power Panel. We've got a quick break, but more Power Panel after that break. You're watching Power and Politics on CBC News Network. A new book by the CBC's own Aaron Wherry is offering fresh insight into the falling out between Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould. That relationship, of course, collapsed in dramatic fashion following a report in the Globe and Mail that the Prime Minister's office pressed the former AG to abandon the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin. The new book includes interviews with both Wilson-Raybould and Justin Trudeau. Aaron Wherry is the author of the new book, Promise and Peril, Justin Trudeau in Power. Hi, Aaron.
Hey, Bashi.
Very fun to do this. I enjoyed your book a lot. One thing that stuck out to me, obviously we're talking about SNC so much lately because of the Ethics Commissioner's report, the way in which Justin Trudeau actually was notified that, and this is revealed in your book, that the story was going to break.
Right. So the Prime Minister's office, there was someone in the Prime Minister's office had seen Bob Fife from the Globe and Mail walking with Jody Wilson-Raybould after a cabinet meeting and sort of realized that something was up. But then Ms. Wilson-Raybould herself texted, I believe it's Jerry Butts in the PMO to say, hey, I had this conversation with Bob Fife. He seems to know a lot about SNC-Lavalin. Something's up. Which is interesting. I mean, it's interesting that she felt the need to tell him. It's interesting that she sort of seemed to suggest that, you know, this was coming and to give him that heads up. Not that it seemed to help them that much, I guess, in the end.
And the interactions also after the story broke were interesting because you've kind of go over a lot of what we've reported on but haven't known really what's happening behind the scenes. Primarily, I'm thinking about the meeting after the story broke but prior to her stepping away from cabinet and
right.
when she did resign, that kind of thing. Tell us.
So they go out, there's the meetings, the fabled meetings in Vancouver. In which, so Trudeau, it's sort of put to Trudeau, that the Prime Minister, that he needs to talk to Jody directly, that they should have this conversation. They end up meeting one-on-one, no one else in the room, just the two of them, to talk this over. He seems to, in his recollection of events, he says he was sort of surprised, didn't understand, wanted to, to understand how this had come about. He asked her, why hadn't you said this to me before? She suggested she had. Then there's sort of these conversations about what exactly it would take for her to sort of come back into the fold. It's hard to tell. It's been reported that there were ultimatums about how she had to. He kind of says
that he told you that there really wasn't.
Specifically,
I guess.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Like it's always tough to tell because there were only two people in the room, and these stories sort of get told further and further and further. I wonder if, to what degree, sort of a game of broken telephone. But she clearly sort of raised questions, concerns about Jerry Butts, about Michael Wernick, about the people that she was concerned about who'd acted during this whole
people
affair.
around him. She seems to say that a lot.
So it's not clear that she ever says, you have to fire these people or I'm not coming back, but she definitely raised concerns. There's also this moment where, according to Trudeau, she says to him, if a DPA is issued to SNC, I will resign from cabinet. He comes out of that meeting, Trudeau comes out of that meeting and says to his staff that that's fairly problematic. That if this issue is about political interference in the judicial process, if this is a concern about too much pressure being put on the AG, she has just raised this kind of odd gambit of saying, there will be consequences if there's a DPA, and that's awfully problematic. Even though oddly though, to me, and the one thing I could never quite put my finger on, and no one else has been able to put their finger on, is exactly why she resigned. Mm-hmm. When I asked Trudeau about that,
she won't say because she says it's still covered by cabinet confidence, and not that waiver that the Prime Minister brought in or through the Order of Council doesn't extend to that period. Right.
So she has said she can't talk about it. Trudeau, when I asked him, okay, so why? What were her reasons? He still seems somewhat unsure of exactly why she resigned. There just seems to be this general sense that she had lost confidence, or she didn't feel that she could continue to serve.
What do you think? I guess I'm also curious as to your general impressions, having talked, to the Prime Minister and to Jody Wilson-Raybould about what went on. Do you think that he, or maybe even the people around him, do they feel like this is a vulnerability for them?
The whole affair in general?
Yeah,
I think there's definitely a consciousness that this was not great.
But like through their own making, or do they feel like that's because of the circumstances?
So I think, one thing, the Prime Minister did say to me, I think he's said it since, that he fundamentally doesn't think he did anything wrong here. So I think he still believes that. I think there is a full awareness of how much this impacted the public image, how much it hurt to have her resign, to have her attacking the government. You know, if you go back, one of the things I talk about in the book is that when she was appointed, and there was a full sort of sense of how important she was, as a person, as a symbol of reconciliation. And I think there was a sense that could go both ways. She was described internally within this government as being too big to fail, that she was too important to let it go bad. And then, of course, it went bad. I think there's a full recognition that this has hurt them, that this has been their lowest moment. But I don't yet get a sense that there is a belief that they actually did anything wrong here. There's still a belief that maybe this went off the rails, but they didn't actually do anything that really crossed the line.
All right, I have to leave it there, but tons of interesting stuff in this book, not just on SNC, but especially also around the relationship with the U.S. and one famous guy named Donald Trump,
right,
the President of the United States. So everyone should read it. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, Aaron Wary, author of the book, Promise and Peril, Justin Trudeau in Power. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.